Welcome to the relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, and now it's time for our weekend recap in what was a huge weekend of action. We're going to kick it off with the super featherweight IBF title fight between then champion Joe Cordina and the challenger Anthony Cacace.
Joe started off all right in the first two rounds, but as we all saw, he was floored in the third. And it was all downhill after that. I believe it was an uppercut that put him down in the third round.
He was overwhelmed. Anthony Cacace was coming on strong, letting go of combinations. Joe Cordina's inability to deal with that aggression, trying to catch and counter, catch and shoot in between.
Wasn't doing enough.
Wasn't landing with enough authority to keep Anthony off of him. Just round after round. From the third to the eighth, where Joe was finally stopped, he was being outfought. He was being bullied.
It's the only way to put it.
When you think about how he looked yesterday, how vulnerable he was, and how he looked the fight before that with Edward Vasquez, it seems to me that Joe stayed at this weight too long. I'm not in the business of making excuses for fighters after they lose. I can only tell you what I think.
And why it happened.
And if you want to know what I think, and you're here, so I'll assume that you do, the last two fights we saw a lot of vulnerability from Joe Cordina, and it's because I think he should have moved up 2 fights ago. That's what I think.
Couldn't take a shot.
There wasn't a whole lot of nuance. There wasn't a whole lot to what Anthony Cacace was doing. He was just throwing punches and bunches, waves of punches, and Joe would try to catch him in between, but he couldn't land with enough authority to keep him off. And I'd wager that boiling down to 130 has sapped his power and sapped his punch resistance.
Why do you figure it's the weight?
Because Anthony Cacace is not that big a puncher. Anthony sports a professional record of 22 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 8 knockouts.
He's not a big puncher.
Out of 23 fights, Anthony's only won 8 of them by way of knockout. He's not a bulldozer. He's not really known as a power guy. So for him to accumulate enough damage that he stops Joe, I feel like it's got to be because Joe's been at that weight for too long. Now, credit to Anthony for coming on strong and doing what he needed to do.
But that's why I think it happened the way that it happened.
Now, Anthony is IBF champion, and he has so adopted Mexico's own Sugar Nunez as his mandatory challenger. What he might find is that he'll get a taste of his own medicine.
What he did to Joe Cordina yesterday, Sugar Nunez will do to him if and when they fight.
That is, if Anthony wants to keep that belt. He's got a mandatory challenger to satisfy, backed by Matchroom.
Sugar's a Matchroom fighter.
There's not going to be a rematch between Anthony and Joe. Joe's likely going to move up to lightweight now, and it's only a matter of time before the order from the IBF comes down for Anthony to satisfy Sugar as his mandatory.
So credit to Anthony for coming on strong, throwing punches and bunches, and getting this guy out of there, taking it out of the judge's hands. He is now IBF champion, but I think his reign will be short-lived.
His problems are just beginning.
And as far as Joe, he's got to ease himself back into activity, ease himself into the lightweight division, and take his time. Acclimate to the weight.
We then come to the battle of the unbeatens at heavyweight. Then unbeaten Frankie Sanchez and unbeaten Agit Kabayel, who laid the pressure on thick, put pressure on Frankie early. Frankie Sanchez is known as a long-distance fighter, a long-range outside fighter. And I've long talked about how when you put the pressure on that kind of fighter, they can't deal with it. Being mid-range to inside and being forced to fight, that's why they prefer to stay on the outside.
Can't stand the heat on the inside.
A pure boxer who's limited to being a pure boxer, 9 times out of 10, they crack under pressure. And that's what Agit Kabayel put on Frankie Sanchez. A lot of pressure.
Agit Kabayel's really making a name for himself.
He was all over Frankie Sanchez from the beginning, forcing Frankie to move around, stay on the perimeter of the ring, circling away, the body work.
Agit was getting in with body shots downstairs, right hands around the side of the guard, upstairs,
breaking Frankie Sanchez down. In Agit Kabayel's last 2 fights, he's took on the persona of a pressure guy, even though that's not how he always fights. But with Arslanbek Makhmudov, then unbeaten, with Frankie Sanchez, then unbeaten, Agit Kabayel made a conscious decision to stay with and stay on top of what is seemingly the bigger, stronger fighter, the bigger man.
Agit doesn't always fight like that, but it seems to be something that he can resort to because he's so athletic. I remember when he fought Derek Chisora in Monaco many years ago.
That's what stood out about Agit Kabayel, that he's athletic. He can fight coming forward, he can fight moving backwards, protects himself well. He's got some speed in those hands, speed in those feet. He's very good.
Combinations.
His variety of punches and his pressure is what won him yesterday's fight. Just staying on top of Frankie Sanchez and landing the right shots in the right place. Took Frankie's legs away with the body work and floored him 2 times in the 7th round.
In case you're not aware, yesterday's contest was a WBC final eliminator to crown the WBC's next mandatory challenger.
Agit Kabayel, in just 2 fights, has fast established himself as a worthy adversary for many of the more established and familiar names at the weight. And you tell yourself that, well, just the act of becoming WBC mandatory doesn't ensure that he'll get all the big fights, because look at Carlos Adames and look at how long he had to wait.
He was the mandatory for well over a year.
The difference, I think, is that Agit Kabayel has Turki Al-Sheikh backing him. That even if he is a high-risk, low-reward to a lot of fighters out there, more established and familiar names, so long as somebody's willing to put the money up,
Agit will get his shot at the big time.
Congratulations to him for another sensational showing over another unbeaten fighter. Agit Kabayel may yet represent the next wave of champions in the heavyweight division.
Because he's in line now.
He's in line to fight for the WBC title. He's in line to become WBC champion. We then come to the IBF Cruiserweight title fight between the former champions Jai Opetaia and Briedis, about 2 years out from their initial meeting. A much older Briedis than the one that Jai Opetaia fought the first time. And to my surprise, he was able to hang in there, hang tough, go the distance with Jai Opetaia after being rocked several times with punches that would have taken out most other cruiserweights, including the champions. I don't think that Zurdo Ramirez or Chris Billum-Smith, Noel Gavor, would have stood up to the shots that Briedis absorbed and kept on fighting. The look of the fight, this was a more dominant victory for Jai Opetaia than the first fight was. The first fight was a lot more competitive, more ebbs and flows, whereas for the majority of this fight, Jai was in control and Jai was winning. It's not until the tail end of the fight that he starts to gas out, lose some steam, allowing Briedis to grow into the fight.
But that was after taking a lot of punishment, more punishment than I think most other cruiserweights would have been able to take. The long and the short of it is that Briedis is a tough old bastard.
There's no other way to put it. It's not an indictment on Jai Opetaia, his ability, his punching power. It's
not
a credit to Briedis' durability and wherewithal.
We've seen what Jai Opetaia can do to younger men. What he did to Ellis Zorro, what he did to Jordan Thompson. These are bigger and younger fighters, fresher fighters than Briedis, who's coming up on 40.
He starched those 2 guys, but he couldn't put away Briedis. To my surprise, he couldn't knock him out. And I don't think that's an indictment on Jai. That's a credit to Briedis, who really has been the number 2.
If Alexander Usyk weren't there at cruiserweight during the World Boxing Super Series, Briedis would have been the number 1 guy. The only reason he's number 2 is because of Usyk.
And after Usyk moved up, he was number 1 for a while until Jai dethroned him, until Jai beat him. The Briedis that I saw yesterday would be a handful for anybody and everybody in the cruiserweight division today. And this guy's almost 40 years old.
It's up to him if he wants to keep going.
I don't really know if that's a good idea. I don't know if he should, though if he does, based on what I saw yesterday, yeah, he can still beat a lot of these guys. He still can. Though once again, Jai Opetaia fought a smarter fight than the first time out. He fought a smarter fight and won a more comprehensive victory. He didn't get his jaw broken in 2 places like he did 2 years ago.
So he learned.
He knew to respect Briedis' power, more so this time than the first. Some might argue that he was a bit gun-shy, a bit cautious, though not timid. He landed big shots, very, very big punches.
Briedis is just a tough guy.
And now that Jai has reclaimed the IBF title, and he still is Ring Magazine champion, he'll set his sights on the other belt holders at the weight. The winner of Billum-Smith versus Riak Portu, the winner of
Gavor versus Rosinski, the WBO champion, newly crowned, Zurdo Ramirez.
With Turki Al-Sheikh's backing, the financial incentive to face Jai Opetaia, any one of these unification matches can happen. The door is open.
He might have seemed like a hot potato before, but now the best money in the cruiserweight division is fighting Jai Opetaia, even if he is a high risk. If you want to get paid, it's a risk you have to take.
And that's how it's supposed to be. We then come to the main event, the fight we all have on our minds, the historic fight between the two champions, Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk, that has given us a lot to reflect upon. So here and now, I'll just focus on the fight. Focus on how I scored it and what we saw. In the first round, I gave it to Alexander Usyk because he was busier in the round, making a conscious effort to go to Tyson Fury's body.
Most eye-catching punch of the round was a looping left upstairs from Alexander Usyk. I gave Usyk the first round, I gave him the second round. Once again, he was busier in the round.
Still going to Tyson Fury's body, trying to take his legs away, while Fury's mostly just moving around and posturing, making faces into the crowd.
Doing very little to win the round.
Fury decided to let his hands go more in the third round,
But I still scored it for Usyk.
who was still going to Tyson Fury's body, and aside from the occasional bursts from Fury coming forward, he was still the busier fighter of the two, busier throughout the duration of the round. Remember, it's a 3-minute round.
You're either working for most of those 3 minutes or you're not.
I gave the fourth round to Tyson Fury, who started employing counter uppercuts, counter right uppercuts to Usyk's body, which was stifling his momentum. I gave Fury the fourth round. I gave Fury the fifth round for that same reason. He was stifling Usyk's rhythm, his momentum.
Interrupting him.
3 rounds to 2 after 5, 3 rounds to 3 after 6, tie score.
Fury managed to catch up.
Counter uppercuts downstairs and counter uppercuts upstairs were landing. It was Fury's best punch of the entire fight.
The most effective.
The seventh round seemed like a swing round to me. I gave it to Usyk because he finished the round strong. Both men had moments in that seventh round, but it was a swing round. So you could have swung it to Fury, you could have swung it to Usyk. I chose to swing it to Usyk, but maybe you had it some other way.
At this point, the prevailing aesthetic of the fight is Usyk is closing the distance on the naturally bigger man who's trying to keep him out and trying to set a trap.
It's after 7 rounds. After 7 rounds, Usyk's gotten in with a substantial amount of left hands.
Fury's gotten in with a few good rights, counter uppercuts to the body, counter uppercuts upstairs.
After 7 rounds. In the 8th round, Alexander Usyk broke Tyson Fury's nose, and he was starting to pick up the pace.
As if he wasn't the busier one of the two already.
He's picking up the pace. Tyson Fury's slowing down. He's clearly bothered now that his nose is busted. In the 9th round, which was the most memorable round of the entire fight, Alexander Usyk gets through with a 1-2 combination from the southpaw stance, a huge left hand that rocks Tyson Fury, sends him into the ropes, and the ropes were the only thing that held him up.
For those not aware, when the ropes are the only thing that holds you up, that counts as a knockdown.
At this point, Alexander Usyk is teeing off. He's smacking up Tyson Fury, going upside his head, moving him from one end of the ring to the other, like a ping pong ball.
I think Fury was allowed to make it out of that round. I think he was allowed to survive because I've seen fights stopped for much less than what he endured in the 9th round.
In the 10th, which I scored to Alexander Usyk, Tyson Fury's still trying to get his legs back. He's running on fumes, and Usyk is still the busier of the two, though somewhat tired from what he exerted in the 9th.
I gave Usyk the 10th round. I gave Usyk the 11th round for the same reason. He's still the busier fighter of the two, still closing the distance and getting punches in.
Fury wasn't doing much of anything except moving around the ring, trying to survive and trying to keep the smaller man out, but still getting hit. The 12th round was a more spirited round, a more even round.
Both guys had moments, but I gave it to Usyk.
The effort from Usyk was a lot more consistent than what you got from Fury, because what you got from Fury were bursts, spurts of activity, but not a sustained attack.
He couldn't because it was a faster pace than what he's used to.
So after 12 rounds and after Tyson Fury has been allowed to survive the 9th, where most other fighters in that same condition would have been waved off, I had it 9 rounds to 3, 9-3 to 8-4.
8 rounds to 4 in favor of Alexander Usyk, plus the additional point from the 9th round from the knockdown.
The 10-8 round.
Some gripes immediately after the fight, that they tried to rob Usyk, that they tried to take it from him, that it was a split decision where it should have been a unanimous decision. Some gripes from Usyk's promoter saying the referee saved Fury from a KO.
I agree, because I've seen fights stopped for much less than Fury endured in that 9th round. In the 9th, this guy's getting rocked from one turnbuckle to the next. He's not fighting back, he's clearly out on his feet, and the ropes held him up more than once. Fury was allowed to survive that round.
If it were the other way around, and Usyk were the one getting smacked upside the head, bounced from one turnbuckle to the next like a ping pong ball, do you think Usyk would have got the consideration that Fury got?
No, but admitting that requires objectivity that a Fury fan isn't going to have, and that's the reality of it.
Case of sour grapes for them.
Vindication for us, because Alexander Usyk was in fact the older, smaller fighter of the two. Tyson Fury had a very clear height advantage, reach advantage, weight advantage.
He's younger, 2 years younger. He's 35. Usyk's 37.
In some ways, he's the house fighter because he's the one contracted to Queensberry Promotions. He's the Queensberry Promotions fighter, not Usyk.
And even with all of those advantages, it wasn't enough to get it done. As I stated several times in the build-up, Usyk sets a pace for a fight that Tyson Fury's not used to. And even though Fury is used to being the more athletic fighter in the ring, opposite the ring, slow and cumbersome heavyweights, Usyk is anything but slow and cumbersome.
Didn't work. After the fight, very sour Tyson Fury, sore loser, stated they only gave Usyk the decision because of the war, sympathy for the war.
Oh, is that what they did?
Why didn't they have that kind of sympathy for Vasily Lomachenko when he fought Devin Haney, if they're giving out gift decisions based on the conflict between Russia and Ukraine?
What about isms aside? I saw the fight. Fury lost.
In the build-up, they all said that Fury would be too big and too strong, too smart and clever for Alexander Usyk, when all he really did was spend most of the fight retreating, trying to stay on the outside of what is the naturally smaller fighter who's not even known for power. Usyk's not known as a puncher.
You've got a 43-pound weight advantage on this guy.
And most of what you did in the fight was spend it retreating and trying to create space. That Fury's success in the fight was short-lived. Really talking about when you talk about Tyson Fury's success in the match is the spell between rounds 4 and 7. 7 you could have scored to Usyk, you could have scored to Fury, but even if you score it to Fury, that's only 4 rounds.
Out of 12.
Go ahead. Be generous, because I know you want to. Be generous to Fury and give him another round. Go ahead and give him the 12th round. At the very best, that's 5 rounds.
7-5.
7-5 Usyk with an additional point due to the 10-8 round in the 9th.
So it's really 8-5.
What I saw from Tyson Fury was an inability to keep the smaller man out, even though he was taller and longer and on the move. He was consistently getting hit with looping left hands and straight left hands, that the smaller man was the busier man throughout longer spells, the duration of the fight, the duration of a round, that Fury couldn't keep him off, and even when he did have success, he couldn't fully capitalize on it.
Because he couldn't sustain it.
Or build on it. He'd get in with a couple of good right uppercuts to the body, slow Usyk down, stop him in his tracks,
Interrupt him.
but Usyk would recover, reset, and get back on the horse, get back on the saddle, and start taking it to Fury for most of this fight, because that's the prevailing aesthetic.
That as time passes and you remember this fight, what you're going to remember is Usyk spent the entire fight crowding Tyson Fury, and even though Tyson is bigger and younger and he's supposed to be stronger, he spent most of it retreating.
Congratulations to Alexander Usyk. The prediction stuck the way I said it would, because I'm smarter than you.
Maybe you'll listen next time.